During almost 8 years, consecutive 8 years of war in Syria, Israel has intervened secretly by providing logistic and weapon support to the terrorist groups that are urging to overthrow President Bashar al-Assad. It seems that by the end of 2018 it changed its tactics and is bombarding Syria in the light, while it does not leave the portion of the Golan it took over some years ago. Some hours in a visit of Chad consultative about the events, First Minister Netanyahu declared that our policy does not change, damaging the relation between Iran and Syria and damaging who tried to damage us. That is our policy. Israel is strengthening its attack in Syria. Is it preparing with a war against Iran together with the United States, even if President Trump announced its withdrawal? What effects would something like that have? Would it be the scenario of the battle between wars between Iran and Israel? What does Russia have to say? Could it avoid the situation from getting hotter? Could one man like Vladimir Putin do something that not even an Iranian character do? The heights of Golan, a new tension between Israel and Syria on the Syrian front. This is our critical move today. We will look the last.
Desde el comienzo, digo bien, de la guerra en Siria, Tel Aviv trazó ciertas líneas rojas para garantizar
red lines to guarantee its security. Minister of Defense of Israel, Avigdor Lieberman, today former minister since last November, as we all know, declared that he would do everything possible to avoid the creation of a Chi corridor from Tehran to Damascus. This was considered an open war threat. Aware of the importance of two decisive and contradictory actors, Russia and the United States, Israel has decided to keep a diplomatic relationship with both. In August 2017, Netanyahu visited Putin for 6th time and talked about the need of counteracting any Iranian attempt at positioning in the region. I now go to the New World Order.com with an article called Netanyahu, the New King David, written by David Hernandez, specialist in geopolitics from the Complutense University of Madrid, specialist in communication, political strategy, and governance. The recent foreign policy of Israel has been marked by its complicated relations with the United States, the rivalry with Iran, and the approach with the main Arab monarchies of the zone. The strategy of former Democrat President Barack Obama of seeking dialogue with Iran and its plans of its Secretary of State to reactivate peace negotiations confronted Tel Aviv with its historic partner. But elections in 2016 in November, Netanyahu bet almost personally for the Republican candidate that gave him the irrestricted support from the White House and reestablish relations. Now, let's go back to the news. What have Syrian authorities said after the attack? Is the attack a setback in the peace process? What position does the Russian government have? Hisan News from Damascus contributes with information. Hello, Hisan. Good afternoon, Lucia. Greetings, viewers. In the morning of last Monday, Israel made a great aggression against the Arab Syrian army with 4 land and air missiles from the Lebanon space and from the north of occupied Palestine, which caused material damage in the international airport of Damascus and unfortunate death death of 4 Syrian soldiers and other 6 persons. The Syrian army repelled the attack and destroyed missiles. The 4 waves that were launched from combat aircraft and the platforms, Israeli platforms against Damascus. We must emphasize that Syrian authorities condemned this aggression, that they said it was made first in response against the advance of the Arab Syrian army against terrorist groups, and these terrorist groups that are losing the war. In the second place, Israel has has understood failure of their plans against Syria and the failure of armed groups for which it decided to intervene directly in the war and bombard the possessions of the Arab Syrian army. But the most important is exercise pressure on the United States and the international community for them to know the Israeli decision of illegally annexing Golan, occupied in 1981. This decision that was rejected unanimously by all members of the Security Council of the United States in 1981, that considered this decision null, invalid, and with no legal effect in the world. Nevertheless, Netanyahu once again insisted this year that the United States should accept this illegal annexion to Israeli illegally occupied territories, which are rich in hydric sources and energy resources. Likewise, it provides Israel with most of water and food. We must also say that Israel, under the false excuse of bombarding Iranian military possessions on Syrian territory, as Syrian authorities report, there are no Iranian troops or military weapons. The only thing is that they are military advisors and equipment that were brought to the country at the legitimate request of Syrian authorities to struggle against terrorist bands and not to endanger the security of Israeli occupation. Israel uses this justification to bombard Syria, the head of the resistance, and complete its plans after the failure of terrorists. Iran also contradicted the allegations made by Israel, and also Israeli information that an Iranian missile was launched from Syrian territory to Golan. For this reason, Israeli authorities allegedly responded with this aggression. Stated the last statement was last week that they do not want to turn Syria in a battle camp against Israel, and that they have other forces where the war against Israel could be concluded in order to take away the occupation of Israel, and that it does not pretend to do that from Syrian territory because it endangers Syrian stability after it has been recovering after almost 8 years of war. Syrian authorities also talk about the silence of the United Nations, its Security Council, and the international community after these aggressions. That would not have happened if that silence would not existed, and also the irrestricted support of the United States to Israel. We must also talk about Russian position. Its Duma Council condemned this Israeli aggression and stated that it is a violation to international treaties and against a sovereign country, and criticized the silence of the international community, stating that Russia's patience has limits and that Russia plans to continue providing weapons to the Arab Syrian government. The rules have changed in Syria after it defeated, the terrorist bands were defeated, and that Russia has provided advanced defense system. The response has been sound, but Syria has struggled and has not used the resources it has received because it's saving them for the future, because possibly Israel will continue with its air and land attacks against Syria to complete the U.S. and Israeli plans of taking over the country. Finally, the Syrian people has emphasized on the braver Syrian army, and stated that they pretend to continue supporting it not only to defeat the remnant terrorist bands that are in the northwest province of Del Sur to the west of Syria, but also to expel foreign invasive troops, the United States, Turkish, and also in occupied by Israel. Thank you, Hisham, for all the data. We had everything related to the position of Syria, its government, and its people. Also, the statements made by Iran and what Israel is saying to justify this new attack, and also what is said about United Nations and international silence. Now we ask, after this attack, which is deemed the largest since the Syrian war started almost 8 years, is there a large-scale war coming in Syria against Iran? What effects could something like this have? We're going to analyze this with our guests after this first pause. Golan, a new scale of tensions between Israel and Iran on Syrian front. Our critical move today. We will add another data that Ispan TV publishes. Jordan. Israel should withdraw from the heights of Golan. This is the position of another neighbor involved and that has interests in this. In a meeting held with Mike Pompeo, U.S. Secretary of State last January 8, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan, Al-Safadi, reminded his peer that the heights of Golan are Syrian territory occupied by Israeli regime, and that international law has this clear and must be dealt as occupied territory. And he said Israel must withdraw from this region within a peace agreement to allow keeping the rights of all parties. This was said on Tuesday, January 8th. Minister Alman Safadi. According to Syrian Observatory for Human Rights with its seat in London, the Israeli attack on Sunday has been one of the most extensive in the capital and was aimed to missiles in Damascus. In any case, what has been said from one side and another confirmed what Donald Trump, or put in doubt what Donald Trump said about withdrawing his troops. After Syrian attempts to recover its sovereignty in the Golan Heights, occupied by Israel through its defense forces, it deployed its heavy artillery. And a little before 2 a.m., Israeli spokesman had issued a report that informed that Israel and exercises are attacking targets in Syria. Interviewed by Galedi Sassal Intelligence Services, Israel admitted on Monday, "This is a clear message to Iran. The policy has changed. Now there is open confrontation with Iran. If we need to intensify it, we will do it. Whoever attacks us will pay a high price." Unlike different times, he assumed responsibility and is assumed as a change of strategy. It's the first time that Israel, conducted by the new chief of army, consistent with his predecessor, and First Minister and Commander of Defense David Lieberman, Netanyahu was trying to avoid Iran's establishment in Syria because it considered that its aim is to operate against Israel and send sophisticated armament to Syria. They are terrorists and we need to stop its expansion on the region. On the contrary, he said that Iran declared that it is not settled in Syria and assured that current and future generations are impatient and ready to fight against the Zionist regime. The First Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded that whoever will attack us will be attacked, and whoever threatens our destruction must assume responsibility. Well, when we reach this point, we must add the vision of our analysts, two from Spain, Juan Luis González Pérez, political international analyst, and for Argentina, Galed Musachabad, also international analyst. Thank you for being here. It is deemed Israel's main aggression to Syria since the beginning of the war in 2011. Israel is now fighting Iran on Syrian territory in the light, without any undercover. Where are we going to? I ask Galed first. Good morning, Lucia. Greetings to Telesur viewers. Yes, at first sight, it seems to be Israel's main aggression aimed to Syrian targets, Iranian targets on Syrian territory. This is part of a sustained and continuous aggression of Israel to Iranian effectives after 7 years of invasion to Syria. What Israel is seeking is to expect the reaction of Iran to see if the United States will get involved, as they're already planning and designing. They're designing a military attack or an instability in the Islamic Republic for a change of administration, which is scarcely probable when next February 11 they will celebrate 40 years of the Islamic Revolution that remains strong in Iran has 7,000 years of diplomatic culture in general. Israel has hypocritical speech. If we go to the history of one another, we will see who is always attacking its neighbors, with Palestine itself. And on the other hand, we see a country that, except for the war imposed by the United States to Iraq in 1980, has had no other conflict in 500 years with no other country. I now ask Juan Luis, does Israel doesn't fear to recognize its attacks to the world? In the last years, it has unchanged hundreds of air attacks, but never recognized its authorship. Since the beginning of this year, it seems that ambiguity is something of the past. What do you think this change of strategy is due to? I believe that if we look at things that happen in time, the trigger of this change of policy of Israel with the attacks that it's performing in Syria, more than 100, the trigger has been the announcement of United States withdrawal from Syrian territory. The United States somehow recognizes it has lost the war, and this caused panic in Israel. So I think there has been some kind of green light for Netanyahu to intensify the level of its attacks and make it public even. There is some kind of change of roles of these countries in this underground war against Iran since 1979. And it seems that the United States will remain with the economic war, sanctions, diplomatic war in order to try Europe leaving G5, and that Israel remain with the military part. I think that there's a clear tacit agreement in this sense, and Trump has said that nothing will happen. It's always Trump always says it clearly. In 2 years, they have spent about $4.5 billion to Israel to defend for defense. So I think there is a redistribution of roles for the war to continue. Well, the United States just steps back. And it seems Israel will replace that direct role. Galeb, do you think that as of these last events, a new large-scale war could be unleashed between Israel and Iran? So Syria will remain in the middle of wars. As we say here in Argentina, Israel doesn't have the fuel to confront Iran in a war. Besides, it does not have the capacity to confront Iran. It's not able to confront Hezbollah resistance either. The thing is that the next war intervention will take place in Israeli territory with the Palestinian involved, with Hezbollah and the Syrian army involved. So what Israel is doing is Israel is far away from Iran, and what he would have to refuel in airspaces that are not friends. So it has a quite complex scenario of reaching Tehran or any other place of the Islamic Republic. For this, it will need the assistance that he has of the United States and perhaps of NATO. NATO's doubting between these actions because Iran is a key country for oil supply to Europe and stop depending of the United States. Galeb, I would like to ask you what consequences for Israel would a final victory of Syria have, which is said to be at portents of reaching peace, and therefore Iran and also Lebanon, that has an important interest and has played in favor of the end of this war. What true consequences would this mean for Israel, that is always threatening or justifying his attacks and saying that what Iran is planning a saint war? That is a lie. The consequences will be reinforce Syria, a Syrian army with much more experience in war, something it didn't have before, and that Israel took advantage of in order to attack Syrian territory, even the heights of Golan. What the axis of resistance has is Israel in fear and nervous. As I said before, it is trying to create a war in order to involve other powers like France and UK to create a coalition, a stronger coalition to confront this resistance axis that has turned quite powerful after the invasion experience. I will now go back to Juan Luis. These hostilities are taking place while the Syrian conflict is appeasing, as we said, after successive victories of the Syrian army with the assistance of Russia. Is a new chapter of regional confrontation opening in this region, especially considering the strategic position that all this region of the Heights of Golan has?
Bueno, yo no creo que se trate de algo absolutamente nuevo, sino de una nueva fase.
I don't think it's the same. I think it's a new phase in the aggression against Syria. We cannot say that the Syrian war from the beginning has been closely related to Iran. The Podesta email said that we will attack Syria to defend Israel from Iranian threat. The total goal of the war against Syria is to clean the Israeli border from enemies, for them to attack Iran without any problems for the Zionist regime. So what is unleashing now is that the war filed with terrorists is over. There was hope to establish an Arab army to confront terrorism. Trump has decided to leave, and we have reinforced Assad, but with some of the greatest enemies like Hezbollah and Iran as a guest, because it has been struggling the border of Iran. So Israel is panicking, and we must see what it's capable of doing. But as my peer said, the Israeli army is not prepared for a large-scale resistance war. And I think that with this type of attack, they wish the Revolutionary Army and Hezbollah to leave. But they have been legally invited by the government of Assad, and right now Syria and is there, and Israel is looking is fearing a threat against the heights of Golan, and this is why it decided to take command. But I think that it will fail because Syria is very well defended. They have 300, 400 reserves, and Israel will not dare to attack because it knows that it is handled by Russian military, and the last thing Israel would do would accept Russia in the war.
Con que dejase Israel de atacar proyectos suyos como el aeropuerto de Damasco, que quieren ponerle un funcionamiento desde el punto de vista comercial, y que se
like Damascus airport. I think this is a new phase, but in which Israel will fail. In this analysis, Juan Luis, I would like to consult, Galet, the Heights of Golan. It's a privileged international position because it connects directly with Syrian capital, Damascus, and from there, in that occupied area, Israel has strategic resources, especially water. Is it possible to take Israeli occupation forces from there?
No sin una guerra
No,
mediante
without a
provocada por
war
Israel.
caused by Israel.
Siria, en ese
In
sentido,
this
lo que ha
sense,
estado
what
luchando es en
Syria
el
has
campo
been struggling
diplomático,
for is
exponiendo
in the
sus argumentos,
diplomatic
y eso
field,
tuvo un
exposing
resultado
its
hace muy poco
arguments,
tiempo atrás,
and it
donde las
had
Naciones Unidas
results.
emitió una
Just
resolución de que
recently,
Israel
the United
debe devolver
Nations
las alturas
issued
del
a
Golán a Siria.
resolution stating
Ya
that
sabemos que
Israel
Israel
should
hace caso
return
omiso
the heights of
de las
Golan.
resoluciones
But
de las
we know
Naciones Unidas en
that
su contra, por lo tanto eso no va a
Israel
tener ningún
ignores
efecto.
all
El
UN resolutions
único
against
camino
it,
para
so it will
recuperar
have no
las
effect.
alturas del Golán
The
es una
only road
agresión
to recover
israelí,
the heights of Golan
franca,
is a
formal, a la
formal,
República Árabe Siria o
sincere
a cualquiera de sus vecinos que
mission of
provoque
Israel to
una
any
guerra
of its to Syria or any of its
establecida
neighbors
ya contra
that
el Estado de Israel. Es decir,
against the state of
el
Israel.
detalle que yo anteriormente
The
dije
detail I
de que se
just
va a
said is
librar
that
o que se va a luchar dentro de lo que es Palestina ocupada no es menor, porque ellos nunca
what will
vivieron esa
happen in
situación.
occupied
Y
Palestine
cuando
is
vean las
not
fuerzas dentro de
little,
su propio
because
territorio, el
when
pánico
the
va a ser
forces
total.
enter the territory, panic
Muchísimas
will be
gracias, Galeb y
huge.
Juan Luis, por
Thank
su
you very much,
receptividad y
Galeb
por
and Juan
ofrecer
Luis,
estas
for
consideraciones suyas
offering
a nuestra audiencia de Jugada
with
Crítica.
your
Hasta pronto.
considerations.
Allí teníamos a nuestros
We
invitados.
had our guests
Momento de hacer
there,
una nueva
and it's
pausa,
time for a
pero
new
de una
pause.
vez podemos
But
anticipar hacia
we can
dónde vamos a analizar
anticipate
en nuestro
where
último
and how we
segmento
will
junto a nuestro
analyze our
invitado.
last
Bueno,
segment with our
mirando la
guests.
dicotomía
By
Estados
looking at
Unidos-Rusia, decíamos,
the
son dos
Russia-United
factores
States
fundamentales, decisivos, pero al
dichotomy,
mismo
the
tiempo
main
antónimos. ¿Cuál es la estrategia del
decisive
primero?
autonomous
Diciendo que ya se va aun cuando ello en la práctica no
actors,
ocurra,
with the United States
y de la
saying that they will
Federación
step
Rusa, que
back, but
evidentemente
this doesn't
podría
happen in
hacer
practice,
muchísimo,
and
teniendo
the
en cuenta
Russian
que el presidente
Federation
Vladimir Putin
that
no
could
pocas
do a
veces
lot,
se ha sentado
considering
en una
that
mesa con
President
el primer
Putin
ministro israelí
has
Benjamin
met several
Netanyahu,
times with
pero en el
Benjamin
terreno fija
Netanyahu,
postura abierta a
but
favor de
has an
Siria y su
open
liberación.
position in
Vamos a hacer una
favor of
pausa
Syria
y
and
ya
its
venimos con
liberation.
Altas del Golán.
The heights of Golan, a new scale of tensions between Israel and Iran and Syrian front. We advances this critical move looking at certain possibilities that the rest of actors in the game have inside and outside. With his traditional way of announcing decisions, U.S. President Trump on last September 19 asked to withdraw the 2,000 U.S. soldiers that still remain in Syria because millions of dollars are spent and nobody appreciates what we're doing. The next day, the Secretary of Pentagon, James Mattis, resigned, questioned by his Democrat links and disturbed by the appointment of the new Joint Forces General Mike Miley, who, with his peculiar philosophy of law, contrasted. President Putin was a skeptic. They've been in Afghanistan for 17 years, and almost every year they declare they will withdraw, but they're still there. Macron said that he deeply regrets because an ally must be trustable and coordinate with its allies. The U.S. withdrawal has not taken place in practice yet. According to Al Arabit Al Jadid, the action will revive the Cold War between that is disputed in the Middle East. From Russia, the first vice president of the Defense Committee of the State Duma, Alexander Cherin, warned that this could be a smoke curtain or distracting element, and that the United States could be preparing more interventions and provocations through its partners, just to say it has no responsibility or to remove suspicions against it. But the fact is that Israel is an armed branch in the Middle East and provides attack supported on the NATO system and the individual cooperation program. Israel was the first country to purchase the new Kazakh from the United States, and in last December started producing the components that makes this airline be visible to radars. We must also consider that the Arab monarchies that found in Netanyahu a new international support are making a common front to stop Iran's regional aspirations. To continue analyzing and deepening, we have from Chile Francisco Coloane, sociologist, international analyst, professor, former UN official in the East and Middle East. Thank you for being with us, Francisco. We were talking about the meaning and possible consequences of the last attack of Monday. Now we want to focus on the rest of the players' possibilities and positions. What, in your opinion, is U.S. strategy? Trump says he is withdrawing. Was this to earn time? Is this an expression of the defeat? Or because he's not interested? Or because he has Israel as his main ally? Hello, Lucia. Thank you for contacting. That is the topic. The United States has Israel as its armed nuclear branch in the region for control. That is nothing new. I have this thesis which I reached reading Syrian analysts. Israel and the United States form two states with a double body, where the international policy of Israel is incorporated in the United States foreign policy and vice versa. I like this concept because we are looking at it in reality. The United States withdraws its troops but has Israel as its armed branch with three main goals. One, to continue the plan of unstabilizing the state, consolidated states in the region, which are Syria, Iraq, and Iran. They started with the invasion to Iraq, and we must remember, this is a milestone in this process. They really destabilized in some way. Iraq is recovering in some way. They almost destroyed Syria, and now the main dish is Iran, which is really crazy. It is crazy to think on unstabilizing Iran, a power. So, Turkey, what does Turkey have to do? It has the great opportunity to be a peaceful actor, but it doesn't play in these terms because on one hand it reaches alliances with Israel, but is also a rival of Iran. On the other hand, Saudi Arabia, which is weaker every day, has this alliance with Israel to overthrow Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Russia is in a cross because it has an alliance with Israel, which is now weakened. Nevertheless, Syria for Russia is an essential element in its global strategy in the Mediterranean, the region. So we have a quite chaotic situation. But allow me to say there's an actor that is absent in this in the practical policy, as Morgenthau would say. Nations. What does it do with this bombardment against Syria that are permanent? They're not only from now, and surround Damascus with supersonic aircraft that could carry a nuclear device. Nobody knows that. Nobody inspects it. So there's an essential danger, which is in essence Israel and Zionism that is incorporated in the United States foreign policy in many countries of Europe. By the end of August, Netanyahu met with the son-in-law and main advisor of Trump, Jared Kushner, to discuss the situation in Syria. First Minister, General Secretary of the United States, Antonio Guterres, said that his country would not tolerate the presence of Iran in Syria and Lebanon. Should we deepen the position of the United States in this regard? But allow me to ask you, in times of Barack Obama, Israel was not pleased with this nuclear agreement executed and bet on Trump, and it withdrew from the agreement, agreeing with Israel that to find the agreement to the surrender of the West to the axis of evil, Iran. Is this something dangerous? More than dangerous, it reflects the U.S. Domestic politics. Trump did not receive the support of Israel lobbying. Let's remember that around 70% of the Democrat Party is is supported by Israel. It's intrinsically supported by Israel, and half of Republicans. That sector was against Trump's election because they didn't trust him, because he does not belong to the U.S. political establishment and of the West either. Therefore, considering that the hatred or Israel lobbying was against the election of Donald Trump, this was a turn of Donald Trump's pre-election speech when he said that he was going to resolve global and local conflicts, Syria, Afghanistan, and other places, to rearrange the political map and start reorganizing the economy. That was the public mandate that Donald Trump used to be elected. He didn't want to interfere. He wanted to resolve conflicts. He turned around. Why? Because the impeachment depends on the Israeli lobby. Stop insisting on his overthrow. So we are in the presence of deeply international policy deeply marked by domestic affairs in the United States. So this concept of this critical move, what is the critical move here? It's domestic from the point of view that Trump has still not stabilized its government and administration, because he has this huge bloc against it, which is Israel lobbying and Democrats, that will keep him from being elected by all means. And this agenda is exactly the same to that of Israel's. They are exactly the same. The only difference is that the United States, there is an element of terror and panic regarding the nuclear holocaust because of historic reasons, and the feelings of guilt also regarding Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is intrinsic in the mentality of rational U.S. politicians, in the sense that the great danger is that Israel has an atomic bomb, is a nuclear country, militarized. So when we talk about nuclear disarmament in the region or the world, Iran has the perfect right to have access to the nuclear device linked to a war power. Now, Iraq has a certain right to succeed to the nuclear powers. Nevertheless, Iran accepted not to have it in good faith. Just like North Korea did it somehow. Nevertheless, it's possible to. Is it possible to have good faith versus classic traditional imperialism of the United States? And this is what the United Nations must study. It allegedly is democratic, anti-imperialistic. Social democracy is not an imperialist method. Nevertheless, Antonio Guterres has been very weak. International social democracy has been very weak regarding Israel, and this is the nuclear thing that Israel has as a backup behind its military actions that are not fully condemned to be prohibited in the future in the United Nations. There is much weakness in the world regarding lobbying that works globally. Now, Francisca, in the former sector, one of our guests we were asking if he saw the possibility of a large-scale war approaching again on Syrian territory, but now between Iran, Israel, and their allies. And our guest was answered that he does not believe Israel has the capacity to do it, and that the greater war would take place in the Palestinian territory occupied by Israel for many years. Are we in a new chapter of a regional confrontation, a larger scale? There's always that possibility. Nevertheless, from what we have seen is a fragmentation of the concentration of forces, relatively equal forces like Israel and Iran on Syrian territory. Nevertheless, we cannot forget an important actor that is rearming, which is Iraq. So here there's a disadvantage for Israel and also a disadvantage for other actors. We also have the situation of Lebanon, that from the humanitarian point of view, a larger war in Lebanon would be the destruction of Lebanon and Jordan. And I tell you this because I've lived there. In Armageddon, it's impossible for this to happen. The trend should be to reconstruction and political negotiation. There's no other alternative. And Russia must have very clear what it will do with its alliance with Israel. So Russia is in a difficult position and is a basic ally in the zone, because the United States has been incapable of containing Israel because it uses Israel in the region to continue. To respond to your question, I think that a larger war is possible, but it will have to be avoided by the international community. I have no doubt. Do you believe that Israel can be taken out from the portions of Golan that is geostrategic and that it occupies for many years, and he refuses to accept its illegality, even violating UN resolutions? They know, and this is part of Israel's internal policy, that this is the mother of solutions. Gradually deliver and disactivate the new settlements and deregulate or re-regulating by eliminating the settlements in Golan and return a part or all to Syria. Once this happens, Israel will be in peace. They know this very well. Israel and the Israeli population and politicians know it very well. This is the key matter for a long-lasting peace in the Middle East, including the Palestinian topic, the return of the Golan Heights to Syria. This is known in Israel, and there are ministers like Rabin, Shimon Peres that talked about this possibility in their political platforms, but not Netanyahu, that is in a desperate situation resulting of the chaos in the Middle East after the invasion to Iraq and the invasion to Afghanistan, that are the causes of all this, because they expand the political exasperation. And the example is Saudi Arabia and the countries of the Persian Gulf that are permanently financing terrorist actions for them to subsist as monarchies. So Israel, that is very intelligent politically speaking, uses this to continue building the terrorist instability in the Middle East. So this complexity inside Israel policy, they know very well that the Golan Heights are irrenounceable both for Syria and the Arab world, and they know they will have to return one part or the entire Golan. They know this. Netanyahu has been in playing cards at the limit, and this has been completely damaging for the peace in the region and the planet itself. Thank you very much, Francisco. Thank you very much. Francisco Coleane, sociologist, international analyst, and former official of the United Nations in the Middle East and East for 25 years. Let's go to our conclusions now with all this information and all the analysis we've made today. Israel, traditional aggressor of its neighborhood in the region, disobedient of UN resolutions, continues attacking Iran and Syrian front. The strategy has changed, and there is even a risk of great dimensions. The United States recognizes it has lost the war, and this causes panic in Israel, and this is why it intensifies its aggression and dares to declare it publicly. The aim is to unstabilize Iran almost 40 years after the Islamic Revolution. The United States and Israel apply the thesis of two states, double body. The United States withdraws its troops, that's what it says, but in practice keeps Israel as its arm branch. Turkey has the great opportunity of being a mediator, but does not play between Arab monarchies. Russia is in some kind of a truce, but bets to the peace in Syria. We have the facts. Jordan also bets on the end of the war. The truth is that we're talking about the last talk in attack in a geostrategic zone that has most of the water that Israel has comes from the Jordan River and the Galilean Sea, and the oil companies exploit around 95% of natural resources of this Druze part. We now reach the end of our critical move. Thank you for trusting us. 12:30 Caracas time. This was always be our appointment. Thank you.